Good morning and welcome to this week's IGTV. Today I'm talking about why is my teenager so forgetful? I think as a parent, there's very few things that are more frustrating and that I get a lot of comments on from parents who literally ask me, like, did my teenager's IQ drop overnight? Or I'm just asking them to do simple things, just to pick up this and they can't even remember. I just asked them and 30 seconds ago, and then they've already forgotten and they haven't done it. So this leads to you're frustrated. You think they're being lazy, defiant, they don't care. And now you're in a world of consequences, none of which are working. Am I right? Your consequences aren't actually working to change their behavior, and they're just as forgetful as they were before. So then it must be defiance. So then you double down, and that's also not working. If this sounds like you, listen, or someone you know, I want you to send this to them. That is totally okay. It is normal to feel so frustrated. It is normal to feel at your wit's end about this and why your teenager just refuses to seem to listen to you or they're so disrespectful in completing just simple things. And they say, I forgot. And you're like, no, you didn't. How could you possibly forget? You just chose not to do it. So we've got this increasing conflict. We've got this increasing divide, disconnection, and it's very painful. It's very painful for you. It's painful for your teenager. It's not working. So let's talk about this. My name is Allie Payne. I am a certified life coach, certified relationship systems coach. I have been empowering parents of tweens, teens, and young adults for the last 17 years to end the painful disconnection, the emotional, baffling blow-ups, stressful silences, and build lasting relationships based on trust and respect. I was a very troubled teen. I was a very angry teen. So if there's something your teen is pulling on you, I promise you, I did it to my parents as well. I've also raised two teenagers who are now adults. So everything I'm going to share with you today is backed by science, also personal experience. And specifically today, we're going to address this relative to some of specific part of the function in the brain and some ADHD. So if your teenager has ADHD or you suspect they might have ADD or some version of, this is going to definitely be something you want to watch or share with someone that you know. If you are here on Instagram, I would love a subscribe. And if you are, or follow, and if you're on YouTube, I would love a subscribe. Okay, so let's hit this, shall we? Okay, so what I want to talk to you specifically about is working memory, okay? So working memory and how it operates in the brain. So I'm going to give you some context first so that we're just like on the same page of how this develops in teenagers, what it's for, and then how ADD or ADHD kind of impacts that, which might be what you're seeing. Okay, so first of all, let me go through a quick definition here. So working memory is sort of like a librarian, okay? A librarian. Now, a librarian, let's imagine though, it's a librarian in a library where you can't go and get a book, okay? You have to go to the desk and say to the librarian, I would like the comic books on Dennis the Menace, or Diary of a Wimpy Kid. But you can't go to that section of the library and get it. The librarian has to go get it, okay? This is up to the librarian. If you're not sure where something is, the librarian would have to look it up on her computer and go find it where it is, because of course she can't recall everything, and then go and get it, okay? So working memory is required for everyday skills. It's required for responding appropriately, like when you're having a conversation, when you're like carrying out an instruction, You're reading unknown words. It's required for facilitating planning, comprehension, reasoning, problem solving, and specifically with learning, because we're talking about teens, right? It allows your teens to process and retain the information they're being taught. So think about that for a second. They have to process and retain the information they're being taught while simultaneously, so it is a multitasker of sorts, working memory, simultaneously solving problems, taking notes, and following their teacher's instructions. Okay? Now, if you are neuronormal, like you have a normal working memory capacity, you probably don't notice any impact yourself with this kind of multitasking. Not that multitasking is awesome for your brain or your nervous system. But now there's a couple parts of working memory. It's not just in learning that I wanted to point out. So the working memory has like a cognitive load, like how much, again, if we go back to, just a minute, let me go back. So if your teen is supposed to process and retain the information that they're being taught, okay, so they're processing what they're being taught, but they're simultaneously supposed to be applying some of that knowledge to problem solve, okay, taking notes, and then following any other teacher's instructions. ADHD, ADD is impacted in the executive function, and one of the things to some degree, because it is a range, that can be impacted is working memory. It does not mean intelligence, okay? Okay, so impacted working memory, if it is has a lower capacity because of executive function impairment of some kind, generally, again, ADHD, ADD, that does not mean your child is lacking in intelligence, okay? Now, here's the cool thing. Working memory actually peaks at about 15. And did you know that teenagers, the adolescent brain, is wired to learn new skills faster than adults? That's in a normal brain. In a neuronormal brain, they are wired to learn these skills, to learn new information, to uptake new information faster than an adult brain. Okay, but hear me out. Again, with ADHD, if the working memory is impacted, that might be impaired. Now, you might say, okay, well, but my child didn't have problem like in elementary school, they were fine. And they could follow simple instructions, say around the house or something, until they hit, about 10 or something like that. Yes, because remember, I also said cognitive load. So the working memory is impacted by cognitive load. And this is why often ADHD and ADD don't show up until advanced level learning. That's a range. Could be grade 6, grade 7, could be grade 10, grade 12, could be as an adult. I also have ADHD because working memory has a cognitive load. So when it reaches its maximum on the cognitive load of the amount of learning or processing, like that multitasking, that librarian in the library, she's at like overload. I'm done. She's at overload and she can't be like looking something up, for one thing that's required over here and then be going to get 2 books from the back of the library for this skill over here. So working memory does have some limitations, even though it does peak at around 15 in the teen brain if you're looking at executive function delays like ADHD. So let's talk about that, okay? I've got a couple screens. I've got my laptop open here because I want to make sure that I am giving you correct information. I was going to say something about something, and now I just lost my train of thought. Oh, yes. Okay. So I want to talk specifically about working memory with habit formation. Because if you're a parent of teens, you're trying to teach your teenager new habits, like independent skills, right? Like take out the garbage, like wash the dishes, or at least please bring your dishes to the kitchen and put them in the dishwasher, right? Or feed the dog, or like pick up after the dog, or just basic independent life skills. Those require working memory. Okay. Now, if you are finding that you're asking your teenagers these things 100 times and they are not getting it, like nothing is improving, you are constantly having to nag and remind and like beg them to and now you are so frustrated that you're in this whole consequence thing because you have determined, you have a judgment and a thought pattern that they are being disrespectful, defiant, lazy, irresponsible. Then I want you to take this in, okay? Just park that for a second and just take this in. So working memory is also required to continue a task. So this is an example for you. I grew up in an upstairs bungalow. Okay, so like kitchen, bedroom, bathrooms, all on one level, on like the second floor of the house. Okay, that was like my childhood home. So in the garage level and the basement, there was a cold storage room. My mother used to ask me from the kitchen, she used to say, "Will you please go down and get me XYZ out of the cold storage?" Okay. We did a lot of canning, a lot of like canned stuff was down there, whatever. She used to ask me to go down there. Now, just to let you know, between the kitchen and the cold storage was there was 14 stairs, maybe 10 steps from the kitchen to the top of the stairs, maybe 10 steps from the bottom of the stairs to the cold storage room door. Not far. By the time she would ask me what to go get, and I would go down the stairs, I would get to the door of the cold storage, open the door, I would stand there. I would have already forgotten what she asked me to get. Now you think, like, how is that possible? You're so irresponsible. And these are a lot of the derogatory terms that I heard because my parents did not have this information either, okay? And I was not diagnosed with ADHD until I was an adult. So my mom learned to ask me to go get whatever I was going to go get. And then she just learned. I would go down the stairs. I would take this 10 steps to the cold storage room door. I would open the door, totally not remember what she asked me to go get. And then I would go back to the bottom of the stairs and she would be standing at the top of the stairs. That's what she learned because she knew I couldn't remember. Now, it wasn't because she was a fan of that and again, had lots of other beliefs that were untrue, but founded in her current knowledge, okay, about me, about why I would forget. So she learned to stand at the top of the stairs. I would come back to the bottom of the stairs. She'd already be standing at the top, and I would look up and say, "What did you ask me to get again?" And she would repeat it, and then I would go, and then I would remember. The second time, then I would remember. Then she would leave the top of the stairs. I would go to the door of the cold storage. I'd get whatever I was supposed to get, and I would come back upstairs. Okay? That's working memory. That is an impaired or impacted working memory, where it's the basic task and staying on task. So again, I have ADHD. So when I work on my phone, and I don't just mean social media, okay? I work on my phone multiple times a day. I will pick my phone up because there's something I'm doing on my computer, but I need my phone to, to do something or send a Bluetooth a picture or like whatever. And I'll pick my phone up, and literally as I'm picking my phone up, I have already forgotten why I picked my phone up. And I will sit there for a second and go, why did I pick my phone up again? And I used to, before I knew this about me, before I understood working memory, I used to then go on to the next thing, which was actually not as helpful. So now I just sit for a second and go, okay, what was I just doing? Right. And then it helps me. Now, sometimes I don't remember, or I remember 10 minutes later, but often if I just sit for 1 second, have compassion for myself, and then I can work with and allow my brain the compassion to just, it's okay, we're okay, you're okay. And in that moment, I'm lowering the load on my working memory so it has more of a chance to go back and catch what just fell through. Okay? Now, that was not my experience as a teen, right? And if you're a parent, that makes sense. Like it's so frustrating. I was just talking to my friend the other day, and her son is 10. And it's quite likely that he has ADHD. She will be at the front door, and tell him, because it's cool out or they're going somewhere after school, and she'll say, I need you to please go back to your room and get your hoodie. And he will, this little gorgeous little dude, he will run back in the house, go into his room or somewhere, and come out with something that is not even close to a hoodie, or not even go in his room. Because by the time he left her at the front door with that task, his working memory couldn't hang on to it. It fell through. So he'd already forgotten in a matter of seconds. Now, I know as a parent, this sounds like an excuse. This sounds like permissive parenting, like you're just promoting them being, super forgetful, or allowing them to be irresponsible. Not if you understand the brain. And as someone who grew up with undiagnosed ADHD and was constantly ridiculed and punished for what I couldn't remember, because my parents didn't have this information, okay? It is extremely derogatory as a teenager on your mental health. Number one, because I was constantly anxious. I was so anxious because I knew if I got it wrong, I was going to be in big trouble. If I couldn't complete a simple task, I was going to be in big trouble. And a lot of times I couldn't because I couldn't remember. But if I went back and asked, that just started the whole cycle of criticism or consequences, or etc. So I was always so anxious about getting it wrong, which is a version of perfectionism, an equal version of perfectionism that's equally crippling, okay? Also, my confidence was very low because I believed I was stupid. I believed that I was less than. I believed I was unreliable. I was irresponsible, that I was lazy. I believed all of those outer things that were continually told to me because of a reflection of my impacted working memory, and doing my best with it, but not having what the expected working memory, because I was also a gifted child. I was highly intelligent. So that didn't match with what my output. You're a gifted child, you have this level of intelligence. So why are you so lazy, defiant, and irresponsible? Right? It didn't connect for my parents. And of course, they did the best they could. They did what they thought was right, is that I needed more consequences. I needed more punishment. I needed to know that I needed to pick up my game around that, except that I have ADHD. And so my working memory wasn't going to just pick up. Okay. So when it comes to forming habits, okay, this is really, really key. You absolutely can set boundaries with your ADHD tween, teen, or young adult. You can have boundaries about what works for you and what doesn't. 100% you can. But setting those boundaries with the expectation that they have a neuronormal brain and their working memory is going to be able to recall that boundary, then make problem solve based on it, and do the decision making based on maybe what you just told them or what you told them one time, is is an unrealistic expectation that is going to drive more pain and disconnection in your relationship with them, because you're expecting their brain to do something it doesn't have. Now, will that increase? Well, actually, working memory again shows that it peaks at around 15, and then it stays roughly the same into the 20s, and then it starts to decline around 50s and 60s. Working memory is one of the first things that's impacted in our brains as we age. However, as a teenager, it doesn't mean it's necessarily going to improve, but there are amazing coping strategies that you can use with your teen's ADHD or ADD brain in order to teach them successful independent habits, even if their working memory is impacted, okay? Now, it means that, first of all, if you're gonna set a boundary with an ADHD teen, like any teenager that you set a boundary with, whether it's about a curfew, now, also, I'm just going to say for free, what you believe a boundary is probably not a boundary, because what you and I were raised with to believe a boundary is actually a threat or an ultimatum or a command. Those aren't boundaries. So that's what I teach in my programs, is the basics of what a boundary is that you and I didn't learn. And so what you're trying to set as a boundary might not be working, just because, again, our parents weren't taught this either. So how would, right? So we got to get what is a boundary first, okay? So a boundary is, Prentice Hemphill said this, a boundary is the place in which I simultaneously love and respect you and me. A boundary, this is my language, my language, a boundary is an emotional tool at a relational level. It's not actually that behavioral per se. It's an emotional tool because it's based in love and respect for me and for my teen. Now, sometimes that might feel like dancing on the head of a pin. Unlikely. Most times it's more like standing on different sides of the Grand Canyon. That's as close as you can get. But are you feeling loved and respected? And is your teenager at least feeling heard and seen for who they are? Not who you want them to be. Not in a way that feels good and comfortable for you, for who they are. Okay? And where is that uncomfortable space in the middle? That's often where a boundary is. Okay? So when you're setting boundaries with an ADHD teen, first of all, again, you're going to have to repeat your boundary over and over with any teenager, because it's habit formation, which is what I'm talking about. Like, habit formation does not happen overnight. Have you ever trained a puppy before? Have you ever trained a puppy to, like, whether you're paper training them or you're teaching them to, like, scratch at the door when they have to go outside, or maybe like ring the bell that's hanging from the door? Have they gotten that right the very first time? If you put yes in the comments, you're obviously like Caesar, the pet whisperer, or I don't know, the dog whisperer, whatever. Nobody learns anything. Nobody learns a new habit the first time perfectly. Not even the 100th time. They just don't. Okay. Now, this is also why when you set boundaries with ADHD teens, in order to teach them more independent skills, like you're asking them again to put their dishes in the dishwasher, you're asking them to take the garbage out, you're asking them to make sure, pack their backpack at night, whatever it is that you're gonna, you got to do this. I'm not doing this for you anymore. So you're setting a boundary around that, and you're trying to teach them these independent skills. Reminding and nagging more isn't going to help. It does not help an impacted working memory for constant verbal reminding and nagging. Here's what does work. Because again, you're going to have to say it over and over anyway, because you're teaching new habits. Habits are impacted in the ADHD brain because of the working memory. In order to form a habit, you need to be able to do a task, a specific task relative to specific cues. Maybe it's time of day, maybe it's hunger, maybe it's you don't have any clean laundry left, maybe you don't have any dishes left in your kitchen that you want them to like bring the dishes out, right? Habits are formed based on a number of different things that have to do with, so I'm just checking my lap, have to do with like sensory input, their like visual input. It has to do with a lot of different things. And that's what actually promotes working memory. It's not the nagging and reminding. Okay? Doesn't actually work. Repeating the boundary in a compassionate, not condescending, compassionate, not condescending, compassionate way with an ADHD brain in a way that is inclusive of sensory input. Okay? So, when you're teaching a teen with ADHD new habits, it is imperative to include sensory input. Okay? Now that can include, again, time of day. So what I say is if you're going to teach a teen a new habit, attach it to an existing habitual routine. Like, we're coming down for dinner. You're going to come to, okay, well, if you're coming to dinner, this would be a good time to feed the dog. Because see how you're attaching it to a habitual routine already, is having dinner. Even bringing dishes out of their room. If you're coming to dinner, you're doing it then, okay? If it is something like they come home from a sports practice or something, that's the best time to empty your backpack because it's something habitual. They're already coming home from a sport where they probably have a backpack, right? So they're already doing that activity. It's the best time to attach something that is new as a habit because it's less taxing on the working memory because you're not asking it to start from scratch. It's like you're giving them like a 20-meter start in the 100-meter sprint. You know what I mean? Like you're giving their brain a head start. It's less taxing on the working memory because they don't need to go and recall as much of the same things. Now, time is massive for working memory. That we have a very, very difficult time managing time with working memory. So that's why saying to them, well, it's 4:00. You do this every day at 4:00. Not so great. Also proven is that digital reminders for ADHD, ADD don't work that well. In fact, digital input is more distracting because remember, part of the definition of ADD or ADHD is their inability. It's not actually an attention deficit. It's the inability to stop interacting with constant stimulus. So they're constantly distracted and doing all these things because of the working memory, right? Like I said, I pick up my phone and I already forget what I was about to do. So it's not just the building a habit, which is what we're talking about here, but it's the how do I keep doing the task right while I'm doing it? How do I continue to be engaged with the task in the moment of starting it? That's requiring working memory. So removing distraction is really big for building habits. I'm not saying go take your teen's phone. I'm not saying this is a reason to cut off all their phone access. I'm just saying digital reminders on their phone are proven to not actually work. More sensory things are better. So working memory isn't just the ability to remember things. It's the ability to work with something in the moment as well. Okay. So, I want also ADD brains get overloaded really easily with too much distraction, too much thing. So part of teaching your teenager effective independent habits so that you don't get so dang frustrated is to make them super, super crystal clear and simple. Okay. So think those Duplo blocks. Duplo are like the big chunky Lego. So instead of trying to give your teenager a task that's maybe got 100 little Lego pieces, that might be too overwhelming for their working memory to grab all those parts from the library, right? Get the librarian going back and forth. Start with 3 Duplo blocks. Make it simple. Not because they're not intelligent. Please don't be condescending with this, okay? Make it super simple and concise and clear. So it's a start and a finish. Okay. Once they're doing that, that's how you build a habit. But that is not overloading their already impaired or impacted working memory. That's given what it is so that their working memory has greater capacity, like the librarian, to go and store that habit now into the library. And it's not so hard for the librarian to go and grab 3 of those things to recall it, to do it. Yes? So this is why you got to break new habits down not because they're stupid. You have to break new habits down so that you're working with the working memory they have and appreciating the cognitive load they're dealing with school, the constant digital input, and level of distraction of phones, which we already know is not healthy for the teen brain. That level of distraction alone will hijack the working memory. And I didn't grow up with technology. I'm that old. But my brain was always going. I had ADHD, and the H was internal, which is true for most women. Most females experience the H part of ADHD internally. So I was like in 100 different conversations with 100 different tabs open all the time. So I couldn't remember one thing from like 2 seconds when you asked me. Not because I'm not intelligent, okay? So habit formation is critical. If you're going to set boundaries, and you're going to, please don't jump to consequences. Jump to compassion, okay? Use sensory reminders instead. Use things like visual, like sticky notes. Sticky notes are really good, but you sometimes have to change them and change the color, because any visual reminder in our brains, the more times we see it, the less you see it, right? That's proven. Okay, that's like a proven statistic. So, and get them to create these. Please, please, please do not go creating a whole bunch of, oh, I'm so glad this is helpful. Good. Do not go creating a whole bunch of sticky notes for your teenager. They're not a child. Okay. What you want to teach them is, hey, whatever, this is your brain. I'm not judging your brain. You're not less than, you're not whatever. This is just works for your brain. So let's do it. Sit down with them, or say, no problem. Let's use sticky notes. Sticky notes are just one thing, okay? It can be on a door. You can hang like a double-sided piece of construction paper. One is red and one is green. So when they've done the task, they flip it to green, okay? And then like every morning or whatever, you go back and flip it to red or something. I don't know. Visual cues are really good. Auditory cues are good. Now, this is where streaming television becomes sometimes, like YouTube, really challenging. Because when you and I grew up, we're so old, we grew up where we had to go and adjust the volume on the TV where there was no remote, yeah? And we had a lot more commercials. Commercials was our auditory and visual cue. Do you remember that? To go jump up and go brush your teeth, like, and get your pajamas on so you were allowed to stay up 15 minutes later and watch the rest of that show? Do you remember that? Okay, well, kids with streaming television and YouTube, they don't have that break, okay? So physical, like having to change. So we use timers. We use timers in our house. Only the person who was using the timer could go set the timer. Don't do it for them. They are not a child. So my youngest son, he, I think, has classic ADHD and he struggles with time. So he would go and set the stove timer out in the kitchen for the amount of time he would come home and he had social media time and chillax, whatever, and go do that. And then the timer would be going off. Nobody is allowed to turn the timer off except for the person who set it. So we'd be like, who's on the timer? Like, because what happens is when you have to physically get up, that there is something that triggers the brain, that sensory, into changing activities, changing behavior. Okay, so that's why a phone timer doesn't work really well. It's easy, just turn it off. Okay, so use different senses to help integrate working memory to build these habits. And remember that when they don't remember, it's not because they're being defiant or lazy. Okay. So sometimes what helps is you ask your teenager to do something, and it's like the first time you ask them, it's just barely bouncing off this cranial structure. It's just kind of bouncing off of it. They didn't actually hear you. All you've done is sort of break their attention and words came out of your mouth. But they didn't actually hear the words. Do you know what I'm saying? That's how I feel. That's what's true for me. So then I usually will say, now I know this is an adult, I will say to the person, will you please ask me that one more time? Because now my attention is on you. All I got the first time that you asked me was to turn from whatever I was attending to attend to you. I didn't actually hear you. Okay? So now when you say it, then you say it again, but you say, hey, and sometimes touch, like if someone puts their hand on my arm or something and says, hey, Ellie, will you please go and take the recycling out? Then I'm like, oh, yes, okay. So there was a physical sensory cue for me to stop doing what I'm doing and go and focus on that one thing. Also, ADHD does collaboration really well. So if you say, hey, let's go do recycling, but you have to say to them, okay, it's after dinner on Tuesday nights, and maybe that reminder's in their phone or something, or it's on their calendar in their room or in the fridge or whatever. Let's go do recycling. What's the first step? Notice I didn't do it for them. So if we're going to go do recycling, what's the first thing we need to go do? Because what you're doing is engaging their working memory. You're engaging that little librarian to go and run and get like, oh yeah, recycling, right? What do we do for recycling? Right, we might have to get the bins, we might have to sort something, we probably have to like, and then what do we do next? Or you're only assisting, you're not doing it for them because they're not a child. So there's this balance between mentorship and compassion and understanding that the working memory that is impacted with ADHD requires more cues, sensory cues. And even when, I can't say this enough, it takes longer for an ADHD brain to build a habit. And even when they do, it won't be perfect. You can have like done this work and your teenager gets it right 10 times. And then on the 11th time, they're going to forget. It doesn't mean they're being defiant. You don't need a consequence. What you need is understanding and empathy. And saying, hey, I noticed the garbage didn't get out. Was there, like, did something get in the way? And like, shoot, I forgot. You'd be like, yeah, okay. You know, we forget. What can we do about it? You work with them on problem solving. Okay, so we forgot to put the garbage out. What's something we could do about that so it doesn't start to stink or we don't get animals or like whatever, right? Because now you are engaging their working memory in the problem solving. Don't do it for them. But don't crap on them in the process. Okay? So you can help your ADHD teen to build effective, healthy, and independent skills and create long-term habits. Okay? But you've got to break it down into teeny bits, build slowly, be patient and compassionate, don't expect perfection, and remember that their cognitive load, which is all from school and coaching and sports and hobbies, you have no control over that. And they are easily overwhelmed. So if their cognitive load is heavy and you're just asking for some basic task that seems like so simple to you, you're not really being compassionate with what's going on in the other 80% of their life where they're not with you and they're expected to do all these other things for teachers and all the rest. Okay? They will learn effective habits and they will get there. And it's going to take more of your patience and it's going to take more time. And it doesn't mean that your child is less than. It just means this information is even more critical. I hope you have found this helpful. And I love if you would share this with any other parent that you know that's struggling with their teen, whether they've been diagnosed with ADHD or not, but there seems to be some working memory dysfunction in there. Please go ahead and share that. Once I get this posted, if you'd like more information on the ADHD articles that I've written from my own experience as an ADHD teen who was undiagnosed, diagnosed as an adult, and raising a son with autism spectrum and ADHD, I'm happy to send it to you once I get this posted. You can just type ADHD in the comments and I will be sure to get that to you. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I will see you next week talking about all things parenting teens. Bye.